Well, we did it. We've made it to day 3. And I am so thankful that you have been a part of this journey. Hopefully, the Passports to Learning has provided new destinations, new opportunities, allowed you to engage, allowed you to get excited, have some new education, and have a very good, totally different experience than you've ever had. I want to thank my family and all my friends, my A4LE friends, for the support that you've been for me and to me through the years. Thank you again to the local arrangements committees, to the sponsors, to the trade show people, our members. There's some people that I really want to say thank you to in the southern region. You are a blessing to me. I know my home is in the southwest region, but the southern region, you have made a home for me there, and I am so thankful. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of your meetings, to share your members with me. And Tim, welcome to the board. I'm very happy that you're a part of this. Thank you to all of you who have served on committees, that have taken the time to be a part of our association at a very different time in our history. Thank you to Julia and Ross for what you have given the association and taking a challenging situation and turning it into a very positive one. Thank you to staff. You guys are rock stars. And Edie, I love my phone calls with you. You always make me feel better. Donna, you know how to take care of me, and I really appreciate you. Michelle, thank you for looking out for the association. You keep us accountable to each other and to our members. Thank you. John, you are my hero. Thank you for your ongoing support over the last 12 years. Thank you for the encouragement. Thank you for our midnight phone calls, walking through the agenda, making sure I didn't jump off a cliff. Thank you to the board. Thank you, Carla and Janelle, for everything that you guys have done. But again, thank you to our members. You guys are wonderful. Thank you for being on this journey with me. So our 2020 A4LE journey started out with great hopes and high expectations. When I shared with you last year of how the Passport to Learning came about, it was about really trying to engage at a totally different level. It was about providing ongoing educational experiences and opportunities, but I wanted you to be excited. I wanted you to find how A4LE can be a part of your family, how it can shape you, how it can educate you, and how it can be a part of your existence. I love to hear the stories of how people have joined our association because of an encounter with someone else, or because they happen to be at a conference or somebody just invited them and they keep on coming. I've had so many experiences in my life where I have shared about A4LE, and they just keep coming, and I love it. And I'm so thankful for you to allow that to happen. Thank you for the experience that I've had this year. It hasn't ended the way I started, and I can feel bad for not being able to live the dreams that I thought I was going to have, but the experiences have really helped shape me to be a different person. And again, I mentioned about a John Wooden quote, don't focus on what you cannot do, focusing on what you can do. And I'm asking you to do the same. Focus on the next year of supporting your teams, supporting your families and this association in ways you never thought you could. Be courageous. I want to thank Carrie Rainey for wearing this key around her neck about courage. I got to thinking about, the key to life is oftentimes challenges and how we are courageous and how we look at life to be something different. And a John Wooden quote is, success is never final, failure is never fatal. It's courage that counts. Be courageous. Be courageous in everything you do. Take that risk, like Lisa Lampkin. Take those calculated risks to make a difference. Sometimes doing the right thing is not always the positive thing, but it's still the right thing. The journey for 2020 was to have a clear focus, solely invested on member value and engagement. For those of you who know me and those that know me well, know that I am incredibly grateful to A4LE. I wanted this year to be about, more so than anything, about delivering member value. I am here to serve you. I will continue to serve this association and continue to serve our members in any way possible. If I am called, I will serve. But the year was focused in on really trying to find value for our members. You pay a membership, so what do you get for it? I wanted you to find that in this journey. Also about engagement. When you're engaged, you learn, you get excited, and you pay that message forward. The mission and vision and goals have somewhat changed, but throughout this journey, I've been focused in on creating leadership opportunities. And we will be able to see the Leadership Forum come to fruition down the line. We have created virtual communities. We now have a new virtual community that was added, our Jedi community. We have lots of chapter events, although most of them are taking place virtually in the Southern California chapter, and thank you, Southern California, you guys are rock stars. We have seen a high increase in participation. We've had virtual tours that really set the precedent for how people can engage in looking at environments in a totally different way. So chapter events, although they're virtual, have really expanded, allowing more people to participate than ever before. Our global expansion continues to grow. We are growing throughout Europe, we're expanding into Asia, and we're growing in our Australasia area. They have really showed us how to be a global membership. We have our global transition board that is working to be able to put a plan together to realize what a global organization really is and to give us that global mindset. And we have risen to the highest heights in understanding how to seize opportunities through crisis. Never waste a crisis is what I've always heard. And we know the strength of our leaderships by when pressure is put upon us, where the stress cracks will appear. Well, let me tell you, you as members, we haven't seen the stress cracks. Although you see fatigue because of the amount of hours people put in, each and every one of you have supported our association to be better than it has before. We're doing things differently, and it's going to be a challenge for the next few years, but we have people in place that will take us on to the next leg of our journey. So in member value, we have virtual learning and these events that will continue to take place. We now have in place our social justice awareness and response through JEDI. We have in place our COVID response platforms, and we're continuing to put that forward and looking at all kinds of opportunities to create more engagement and more expansion of what our association is doing. And we continue to provide leadership development opportunities. For me, engagement, again, was one of the big key elements. Not only being connected in face-to-face environments, but in our virtual communities. I know we're all Zoom fatigued, but we're still on board. We're still engaging, and we're still finding ways to laugh at ourselves. Never waste a crisis to be able to learn from each other. This year, our engagement has included the pivot, the jump, the duck, the look, and the respond. And yet, each of you are looking for ways to serve. So thank you. So our 2020 journey comes to a close, and as 2021 approaches, I still hope that we recognize that our members add value and that we need to add value to our members. If your actions inspire others to do more, dream more, learn more, then you become more of a leader. That's John Quincy Adams. Engagement is about recognizing that no person's success is a solo experience. His journey is accompanied by the benevolence of others. It's that paying forward, it's that mentoring, it's that encouraging and nurturing that really makes people want to engage and realize that they matter. So as I end my year as chair, and as I share with you the accomplishments of the organization association, it is with great privilege and pride that I welcome and introduce to you our 2020-21 chairman, Phil Poinelli.
Thank you, Julie, for your service and dedication to the association. I'm honored to take the chair position and look forward to our continued collaboration in the next year. A year ago, as we wrapped up our LearningSCAPES conference in Anaheim, energized by our keynote speakers, the super session, and so many member sessions, we returned home inspired and ready to take on new challenges. Who thought the challenges would be those before us today? In my nearly 50 years in the profession of planning and designing schools, schools and education were almost never in the nightly news. Today, schools and education consume a significant part of the news. Much of what we hear include attempts to open schools, some successfully and some not so successfully. How many teachers and students tested positive today? Is remote learning effective? The gaps between the wealthy districts and the underserved districts. Most everything we hear is negative or concerning. But in our A4LE circles, a lot of the discussion is positive. It's not to say that we aren't wrestling with the short-term ramifications of the world condition, but we're also looking forward to what education, schools, and society can look like. We're discussing the opportunities to positively impact changes in education. I recently attended a Zoom session put on by our A4LE UK Europe region. The theme was education and learning environments in a post-COVID world. There was a lot of optimism being expressed, as there has been over the past 3 days. Many of us have brought these positive topics of today into our lexicon and planning process. Terms include collabrified, joining curricula, children, and space, confidence, inspired, challenged, giving kids control of their own data, infecting communities with learning, adults learning from children. No such thing as bad weather, just bad clothing for outdoor learning, and education marketplaces. These discussions resonate with many educators, but not so with some others. But with the difficulties of remote and hybrid learning with marginal outcomes, educators and communities are likely to embrace these more progressive attitudes to schools and their design. Our world condition includes what I've been calling the triple pandemic. The first pandemic we immediately default to is the worldwide COVID-19 pandemic. So much of our recovery is outside of our control, but mask wearing, social distancing, and following recommendations from scientists and science are our responsibility. The second is racial injustice. Black, brown, and indigenous communities of the US and around the world have suffered even more significantly this year than in years past. The COVID-19 pandemic has disproportionately impacted many of these communities with infections and deaths. The senseless killing of Blacks in the streets and in their homes brought the awareness of social injustice and systemic racism to a level that can no longer be ignored. Mindsets must change, and investments must be made in marginalized communities. The third pandemic is the growing economic crisis in education, directly resulting from COVID-19 and social injustice. This is certainly the case in the US districts that face both short-term cuts and long-term budget falls that are likely to impact communities for years to come. The economic crisis is devastating school districts and communities across the world. The COVID-19 pandemic alone is costing billions of dollars needed to reopen schools and keep students and teachers socially distant and safe. Teachers and staff layoffs are taking place universally, as are curricular and program cutbacks. There's a likelihood that teacher and staff layoffs will expand to include social workers, counselors, special education specialists, classroom paraprofessionals and aides, and others who are needed more than ever to help students with social emotional impacts of these combined crises. Layoffs will also likely impact the arts, enrichment programs, and electives essential to well-rounded education. These three pandemics are affecting the world in profound ways and will take years to right. All three are deeply interwoven and create staggering impacts on children, families, and communities, the people we serve. So what does our year ahead look like for A4LE as an association and efforts by leadership? Well, addressing the triple pandemic, We need, as an association, to find ways that each of us in our private and professional lives can address these issues. COVID-19, we have a number of committees underway, including Envisioning and Reimagining Schools. Social injustice, our JEDI committee, Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, had a town hall a few weeks ago with over 300 attendees. We're asking all regions and chapters to start their own JEDI committees. Can our Schools Next program make inroads into BIPOC communities? Can JEDI mindset training be set up in chapters? The economic crisis around school funding is going to take international and national leadership, private sector support, social activists, student voices, and the best minds in education and government to work together to collectively build a new tomorrow. The association is taking on the efforts of a new strategic plan. Over the next few months, the A4LE board will begin the process of developing this new 5-year strategic plan. And among other things, my expectation is to have the triple pandemic as critical components of the plan. The plan will also focus on our steering committees. We will need to continue to invest in our membership and development and knowledge center committees. We believe that we are, and hope to get the word out to others, that A4LE is the trusted source of information for educational planning. Also in this strategic plan, we've had a lot of discussion over the past few years about redoing the organizational structure to truly make us one organization as we reach further around the globe. Our transition global board is in place, developing a process and business structure that will make the organization stronger, and in the process, give you access to the best thinking in education from around the world. That's a lot for us to be working on. We can't do it alone. We need your input. We need to be transparent about what we do and how we do it. If we're able to accomplish some of what I've described, individual schools, school districts, private firms will seek us out and want to be part of our good work. I'd like to wrap up with some personal notes. I'd like to thank Julie Williams for her chair of the board of directors. Julie had a very full agenda planned for this year. This conference planned for San Antonio, expansion in Europe, including a conference in Germany, an association code of ethics, advocacy and lobbying, engaging ALEPs and committees and leadership and leadership activities, and more. Little did she know what was about to happen. Although some of these initiatives continued through the year, COVID prevented face-to-face meetings, and significant efforts were spent canceling conferences and activities. Through all this, Julie kept saying to us, never lose an opportunity to make something positive out of a tragedy, and we're working on it. Thank you for your year as chair, but don't forget you have one more year as immediate past chair, and I look forward to working with you. I'd also like to recognize Philip Idle, outgoing immediate past chair. Phil's been on the International Board of Directors for 7 years, first as regional director for Australasia, and then on the executive committee. With a 12-hour time difference to the US East Coast, meetings, often multiple in a week, must have been challenging, but never a complaint. As regional directors, Phil and I had not had a chance to get to know each other well, but over the past 2 years on the executive committee together, we've become good friends. His calm and thoughtful nature, coupled with determination to take on tough issues and see them through, showed real leadership. Thank you. Phil, I'm sure I will seek out your counsel on tough issues over the next year and beyond, but more often to say hello, friend. Thanks again, Phil. And finally, a nod to Kelly Tanner. This spring, we lost a dear friend and member of our board of directors to cancer. Kelly Tanner regional director from the Pacific Northwest, was deeply involved in the organization and its leadership, a champion for transparency and inclusion with insight and perspective. We thank her for her calm but persistent demand for performance, accountability, and to do what's right for the association, our members, children, and society. If she were still with us, she'd be a driving force in our Jedi exploration, listening, but also acting. She took an active interest in issues and efforts of the board, and I tip my hat to you, Kelly. We miss you. A proper tribute to Kelly will take place at the virtual A4LE Planning and Design Awards program. The tribute will be presented by her colleague and good friend, Amy Yurko, and will take place on December 8th. I hope you will take part in that program. It's humbling and a bit scary thinking about leading this organization of amazing and diverse professionals, all contributing to making learning environments better for children and communities. I look forward to working with many of you in the coming year. Now for today's main event. I'd like to introduce Paige Detman of Meteor Education. Paige is an ALEP and graduate of the Advanced Academy. She's now teaching the Academy module on student-centered environments and community engagement. Her primary professional responsibilities with Meteor Education, where she is the Chief Education Evangelist. Meteor is the sponsor for our closing keynote speaker. They have made it possible for us to bring you the outstanding conference contact throughout the past 3 days, and most specifically this session. Please welcome Paige Detman.
Hi, I am Paige Detman, Chief Education Evangelist at Meteor Education. At Meteor Education, we know how critical it is to be intentional about microenvironment design because the environment definitely impacts learning. As a former school and district administrator participating in change management pretty much my whole career, I observed classrooms where project and inquiry-based learning were impeded by microenvironment design. Meteor Education believes that an environment must be in harmony with the intended way students will learn. That's why we focus on instructionally sound microenvironment design, making sure that our learning environments are not just cool looking, but that they actually serve the educational purposes behind them. Let me show you what an instructionally sound learning environment looks like. High school English Language Arts and Social Studies helps students develop an understanding of their world. Your classroom invites peer-to-peer interaction and communication and active interplay with complex text using writable surfaces and technology. A variety of casual, rearrangeable, and comfortable activity zones offer safe places for learners to express themselves through spoken and written language. This full-service high school math class declares learner collaboration with zones for knowledge co-construction and project creation to consolidate thinking. Eye-to-eye proximity of work surfaces enhances team-based projects where peers teach one another. Learners express their thinking and solutions on writable surfaces and through interactive technology to visibly share evidence of how they arrive at a solution. In the middle of your school, the strategically designed media center with a collegiate vibe is open and transparent, drawing students into the space as a meeting spot for exploration, creation, and socialization. The interactive areas in this high school learning commons are filled with comfortable open area soft seating and breakout rooms that attract students before, during, and after school. I've always felt that instructionally sound designs like you just saw enable student-focused learning experiences that prepare students with skills for their futures. I have witnessed how purposeful environment design supports learner collaboration, which accelerates engagement. Some of our greatest opportunities to affect future generations are happening right now with schools that are being built. Yet one of the biggest potential points of failure is that those environments go in and teachers don't understand what to do with them. They may reject them or use them in a way that they weren't intended, which can sometimes stifle collaboration. The second part of Meteor Education's purposeful environment solution is teacher onboarding. with the goal of mitigating that potential point of failure. Our educators work side by side with teachers to help them understand and competently use their new environments. We are pleased to be part of this great A4LE organization, and I am excited to be on the ALEP certification program faculty. You can reach out to me anytime about accelerating learner engagement. I'm delighted to introduce our keynote speaker, Rex Miller. Rex began his career as a project manager in the architecture and construction department for Southwestern Bell. He holds a master's degree as a futurist and was a corporate leader for 25 years prior to becoming a consultant. Rex loves to work at the intersection of complex challenges. He addresses issues such as the common nightmare of delivering capital projects, workplace disengagement, toxic shadow cultures, school and workplace health and well-being. Some of his clients include Google, GoDaddy, Facebook, Intel, and Hayworth. Rex is the founder of MindShift, a futures advisory and research firm that addresses wicked problems. He has written several books to do just that, including The Commercial Real Estate Revolution, Change Your Space, Change Your Culture, Humanizing the Education Machine, and The Healthy Workplace Nudge. Rex's latest book is called Whole: What Teachers Need to Help Students Thrive. For this book, Rex teamed up with the nonprofit Global Center for College and Career Readiness, the Momentous Institute, and Meteor Education to find solutions to the wicked problem: how can stressed communities, families, kids, and schools not just survive, but thrive? Visit the Habitat for Heroes website to gain practical ideas that can empower district, school, and community action. Now, here is Rex Miller speaking about going from hero to guide, the journey to building resilient teachers and thriving students.
Are we ready? Okay. So welcome to the final session. You've made it in your passport to learning, and I'm your final destination. And just as Paige said, we're going to talk about how to build resilient teachers and thriving students. And part of that journey is your personal journey in this as well. Resiliency is going to become a new design criteria. If we're going to have resilient teachers and thriving students, we need happy and healthy educators. And we know right now we're in this condition of the pandemic, which is adding more stress. So it's even more important. In order to lead, you're going to need to model. It's going to be a new leadership style, and we'll talk about that today. So what I'd like to cover during this time is why COVID follows the pattern of mass disaster recoveries. We need to understand the nature in order to understand what we've been through and where we're going. I also want to address why we need to solve for resiliency, why that is a new design criteria that we need to go in and talk about. Are the solutions we're providing going to help us become a more resilient classroom, more resilient students, more resilient teachers? Now, your journey used to be that of the expert, but we've all been thrown out of the expert category because we've never been down this road before. So our new level of credibility is going to be your own level of resilience. Your credibility and your modeling is your new level of expertise. And that also brings us to your role is going to change. Used to be we could come in with all the solution sets. We were the heroes, but now we're the guides to help our classrooms and our teachers and administrators find a way together collectively to rebuild, to restore, and to get back to learning again. Finally, I'm going to cover the 6 disciplines of what's called post-traumatic growth. These 6 disciplines are also design criteria, which I'll share about. So a little bit of background and context. This is an image of the last research project that we did. Paige referenced it, the book called Whole. And here we're in a school called Rise. It's in South Central LA, and we know that environment is very challenging. This happens to be a school for homeless. And these kids, there's 200 of them, more than 80% graduate and go to college, and 60% graduate from college. An amazing area. Just a little bit of insight. When we're tackling wicked problems, areas that have been stuck for a long time, part of the research model is we go and see. And what we go and see is we look for outliers, people who are getting great results in unexpected ways, in unexpected places. And this definitely was a positive outlier. And when we ask the questions, we're not looking for the pretty case study. No, not at all. What we're looking for is whoever led that journey, and it was a journey of discovery. How did you survive? How did you get approval? When was the lowest point, and when did it turn around? So those are the stories that you'll find in the different books. And this is just one example. Now, here's some of my journey in the education world. As Paige said, most of my clients are corporate. And what I find is because of our futures focus, we learn lessons from corporate that we can bring into education. For example, engagement and culture is very strong in the corporate world. However, what we've been able to take from the learning world back into corporate is the whole idea of social emotional health and social emotional literacy. That's so very important. So I am very engaged when we get to do these cross-discipline research projects. Now, humanizing the education machine was trying to solve the wicked problem and lower the constraints to engagement and the obsolete learning model that we actually developed during Gutenberg's time. So we've got this 500-year learning model that I think the pandemic has busted wide open, gives us an opportunity to reset. After that book, what we started to see is that what looked like disengagement in teachers, Gallup says 70% of teachers are disengaged, may have been something altogether different. When we looked at it, what we found are weary warriors, heroes on the front lines. Education is a habitat for heroes. And what looked like disengagement was actually weariness. It was trauma. It was depression, all of these kinds of stress elements that test out and look like disengagement. So we began a new research project, and Bill Latham with Meteor Education began to help us pull the team together so that we could look at this and go after the challenge of how do we create happy and healthy teachers. It takes a happy and healthy teacher to create a thriving and engaged student. So a little bit of since that point, this book came out in March, and right as it came out, we were hit with COVID. And during that, we pivoted and began working on what we saw as an emerging issue, which is supporting the mental health issues in the workplace as we try to figure out what's happening, and we're sheltering in place and we're isolated from one another and we're going through Zoom fatigue. This is a major issue for schools. It's a major issue for the corporate world as well. So let me start out with a little bit of my story into this new element. On March 12th of this year, my family and I were down on Padre Island in South Texas, enjoying spring break. On the drive home, I began to hear some news about this virus. And of course, I wasn't too concerned. We were really outside of all the news that was going on. And during our trip, I had a big aha. And my big aha is when I went to the H-E-B grocery store and found all of the dairy cleaned out, all of the meat cleaned out, all of the paper products cleaned out. And it was the first time I said, something's up. Now, Padre Island is in hurricane area. So I know these are the kinds of things that happen when you have a hurricane or a natural disaster, is all the main products are cleaned out. This was my first indication that something might be up. So when I got back to the Dallas-Fort Worth area, I reached out to one of our colleagues who helped us in the research for Whole. His name is Dr. Jernigan. He's a clinical psychologist that specializes in post-traumatic stress, burnout, and chronic stress. They've worked in 4 war zones, and so they understand the nature of a mass disaster and how that psychologically and emotionally affects us. And he said, Rex, what we're experiencing is nothing short of wartime conditions. So I asked him to explain, and what he did is showed me a chart. And this chart helped me understand that this was much more than just an event that we would go through and somehow everything would be restored back to normal quickly. What he showed me is a journey that we're all on. And these are the emotional stages that a population goes through when they go through a mass disaster. And there is what we call this pre-disaster moment. If you've been on the coast, my wife is from Mobile, Alabama. I've been in Mobile during hurricane times, and you get a pre-warning. Now, Mobile is used to hurricanes. So there's this drill, you know the drill. You get a little bit excited, a little bit anxious. You make sure you've got your staples and you just wait it out. And you don't know until you get hit what the impact is going to be like. And so when the impact hits, very often for the next several days, electricity is down, trees are down, and it's just a mess. And so there's this disorienting time called the impact, and you go through that and you restabilize. But not far after that, there's what we call this heroic phase. And the heroic phase is when we do our best work and we come together and we have all of this energy. We're working on adrenaline. Now, in the corporate world, we saw those early signs in April and May where everybody was working from home and there was a big aha. And the big aha is, wow, our business hasn't shut down. In fact, we're doing pretty well working from home in this new Zoom world. And some companies began to make the decision that this might be a new business model, and we might be able to transition to this and get rid of some of our real estate. However, we were warning that because we were in that heroic phase, all of this great effort was a false signal of what the real potential was going to be, that we would see a drop off. So we've seen that drop off. In fact, I've been giving webinars to teachers, a couple thousand teachers over the last month, and watching their faces and looking at what their expressions are and what they're saying. What I'm hearing is that it feels like May and it's not even Thanksgiving yet. That's a lot to take in. They're already tired and stressed. They're trying to teach in 2 different models, Zoom and some in classroom. And then the parents too. I coach lots of parents, and I've got several that I coach and they've got their child on their knee or kids in the background. And kids' schedules don't necessarily line up with your meeting schedules. And then I'm watching classrooms where you've got first graders and second graders, and that's not an easy thing to do in Zoom as well. So all of these new stressors. And what happens is there is this honeymoon stage. And for education, it was during the summer. A lot of schools thought, well, we'll open up in the fall, and they made lots of plans getting ready for the fall. Companies said, we'll open up in the fall, and began these plans and coming back. And then we had rises and spikes. And then some schools that opened up found that there were some cases of COVID and then had to shut down again. These bring us into the next stage of a mass disaster, and that's called disillusionment. When you have that heroic stage and then you have a little bit of breather and you look forward to that light at the end of the tunnel and then you get triggered, there's a stage of disillusionment that people go through. And then there will be this continual triggers. Those TEs on the charts are trigger events. And normally at the annual event of this, there is a trigger event. It's a psychological event of everybody being thrown off. But then we begin the reconstruction and rebuilding. We get to the very bottom of it and we find, okay, now we can move forward. And then we begin to move forward even in the challenging times, because we've let go of what we were hoping would remain, and we've begun to rethink freshly again. I think that's some of what Julie was talking about, is this is an opportunity to think new again. So that's where we are collectively, but where are you individually? Well, we're all somewhere on these 5 stages of grief, and I'm using the Kubler-Ross stages, and there's different ways to look at this, but this is the most common one that people reference. So I'm using this because I think you'll relate to it. So as I'm walking through these 5 stages, what I'd like you to do is make a note and ask yourself, where are you in this? So part of the challenge, do you feel safe to tell your story? That's one of the things I was hearing even early talking to some of the people before we got on board. One of the key areas is, where are you? Do you feel safe telling your story? And is there someone helping you process through a sense of loss? And that sense of loss could be not being able to see the kids in the classroom. That sense of loss is maybe some of the projects that you thought were going forward didn't go forward. The sense of loss is not being able to get in front of people and solve problems together. Whatever it is, we're all going through something, and we're all at one of those stages. And as leaders and as guides to your schools, getting through it quickly is what we all need to do to be our best. So let's talk about the first stage. And the first stage, we all know, it's called denial, where you put on the happy face, but you're not happy on the backside. And so what could this look like? Well, for me, when I was driving back from Padre Island, it's a virus. It's not a big deal. We'll get through this. So there's lots of ways to be in denial. Not preparing is part of denial, because you're hoping things will go back. Listening to, I can't wait until things get back to normal. That's another form of wishful thinking. We deflect the hard decisions. We put them off. We keep up the appearances. No matter how we're feeling, we try to, and we think as leaders that we have to show that stiff upper lip. With my family, when we were going through some of this, I felt I needed to have that positive outlook. We minimize the concern or threat. Then there's this full steam ahead. Let's ignore what's going on. We have education we've got to teach our students. Let's keep going forward. These are some signs of denial. Most people are through this phase, but remember, every new cycle and everything we're holding on to, we go back and visit these stages. So these aren't linear. We'll oscillate back and forth between the stages. So where are you? Where are your clients in this? Now, the next stage is the anger stage. And it wasn't soon after I got back to Texas, or up to the Dallas-Fort Worth area, where my clients started canceling events. What I'd normally be doing is a live version of this. And I'm getting frustrated thinking, oh, they're overreacting. What's going on? Why is this happening to me? So here's some signs of being in that anger stage. You just feel on edge, or you overreact to small things. Something triggers and you've got a reaction that's far greater than the thing itself. You're prickly or grouchy. My wife calls me on that a lot. When I have a setback, I can be a little bit prickly or grouchy for a day or two. And she just says, okay, this is the no hug zone. I'm not hugging you right now because there's a little bit of prickliness. You start blaming others or feeling the victim, or you have misdirected anger. You get angry, but it's not really directed to anything specific. These are some potential signs. And I certainly went through these as I began to see my events cancel and see and imagine all of the negative things that might happen. And then there's the one that's the most common. And this one is the avoidance side, or what's called the bargaining. And it's just being busy and doing busy work, or kicking the can down the road. Avoiding the hard decisions. answering and addressing all your emails, spending a couple hours doing low value work, organizing your office, thinking about things that really don't apply, postponing decisions. It's the procrastination zone. You might rationalize some of your choices. You chose to do something that wasn't very important, but you give it more importance than what it really deserves. And then one of my favorite is deciding to decide. Now, I want you to know that this stage, and remember these 5 stages, we all go through these. Nobody avoids the stages, even when we're making normal everyday decisions. We go through these. And what I find very common just in normal pre-pandemic eras are teams and schools and businesses stuck in this phase, not wanting to make some hard choices or hard decisions, and they decide to decide, or they create a committee. So this is a symptom of being stuck. Remember, all of these are phases, and we need to cycle through all of them, but we can get stuck in some of them as well. And then the one we need to watch the most for, and that is that despair zone, that depression, that giving up and feeling like all is lost. In one of the individuals I was coaching, he lost his job after 16 years, VP of Human Resources for an organization. And just talking to him in my first, it was just boom. He couldn't see any positives, all the assets he had, the resources he had, the certifications he had. He was just so down and beat down with this. And then the following week, I had to change an appointment with him. And so I had my assistant reach out and change the appointment. When I got on the phone with him, his first comment was, when I saw that you had to change the appointment, my first thought was you had given up on me as well. So this is real, and this is a zone, and we need to watch our colleagues on this. Signs of trouble sleeping. One of the first questions I ask in coaching is, number 1, how are you doing? And I pause and I look at the face. The second thing I ask is, how is your sleep? Those are the first 2 questions I ask in every coaching session. Ask your colleagues that, because that's a key sign. If there's trouble sleeping, or if it's hard to answer quickly or upbeat, then you know that's a time to pause and not get straight into business. Just pull back a little bit and get that human touch. I had a coaching session yesterday with an individual, and I just asked, how are you doing? And she shared that she lost her father 2 months ago and wasn't able to say goodbye to him. Well, we had to pause, and she had to feel it. And I had to give that room, and your colleagues are feeling this. So one of the things I'm learning from this is that there's more to getting things done than getting things done. There has to be these human moments that we have. If you see somebody stuck going through the motion, or you see this really negative spiral and they're not themselves, don't ignore it. Please don't ignore it. I can give you all kinds of health statistics on the rise of anti-anxiety medication, sleep medication, suicide watch. Up to 25% of individuals have thought about suicide during this. So please don't ignore this. Now, there is a stage we all get to where we completely let go. This is somewhat of a form of emotional death. It's a little bit of numbness, but it's letting go, and we have to be able to let go. And then we come to a point of feeling like, I can survive this. I don't need to go back and hold on. Or you might start thinking, hey, this is a chance to start fresh again. Or like me, looking at it and saying, there's no return. I can never count on getting on an airplane again to deliver my business. You begin to see new potential. So think of the metaphor of the winter and the spring. This is the winter turning into the spring, and it's an emotional stage. And once you process through, you do begin to see new things. We're wired to see potential and growth. And then you begin picking up this new adventure, the potential of things. Your curiosity gets reinstalled in your system. Learning becomes fun again, and you're adaptable, and you begin to see little things that you make progress or you learn over again and find joy in it. So stop for a moment and just think about, where are you in the journey? And be real and make sure that there's somebody that's helping you walk through this. So one of the great things that I hope we come out of this is we're all going through this at the same time. And because we're all going through something and we're all in some stage, the superintendent's going through it, teachers going through it, parents going through it, suppliers going through it, taking away the stigma and making it okay and having safe ways to talk and process, because externalizing how we feel, not wallowing, not whining, but externalizing what it is. How did it impact you? How did you feel about it? How do you feel now? What are you looking forward to? These are all important parts of helping us all process through this. So I'd like to switch to the topic of trauma. Most of our research in trauma is through the last couple of wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. And what we found, for example, is in 3 million tours of duty in Iraq, somewhere between 11 and 20% of soldiers came back with some level of PTSD. That's over 450,000. And what we began to do, Dr. Martin Seligman, who I'll reintroduce in a little bit, did research for the military on how do we help these soldiers build back some resiliency. And so I've got firsthand experience, not myself, but in our family, I know what trauma can do and kind of the stuck mode. It's called a default mode network in the brain. We've actually had brain scans with family members through Dr. Amen and the SPECT scanning. So we've dug into this deeply. And part of this came out of the research we were doing in adverse childhood experiences in the Humanizing the Education Machine. So this has been a personal journey as well as a research journey. And what we found, and what Dr. Seligman found, is that there were a few set of traits that those who came back stronger because of the experience, they became more resilient, and these became what I call the disciplines of post-traumatic growth. How do we get stronger? And so what I'd like to do is share a little bit of my story and how I began working on these, and then how you can develop them as well, and how they play into your support to your clients and in your company. So for me, this began in 1999 during the dot-com crash. That's when I first needed. I was literally brought to my knees during that period. I was a brand new VP for a company, an office furniture company in Dallas, Texas. I moved my family from Virginia. And then in November of 2000, the dot-com crash started hitting us. We lost 70% of our revenue in 3 months. And in March of 2001, I walk into the office and find my emails aren't working. And I thought, technical difficulty. And then the IT person said, go talk to the owner, go talk to John. Well, John sat me down and I knew something was up because he was just wound tight. And he pulled my contract out. I had a 10-year contract, and he ripped it up and said, we don't need a VP of sales. We need sales. You can either leave now or go back into sales. So I did. And it took 5 years to climb back out. I lost 95% of my I lost just about everything we had, was in deep credit card debt, but found a way to build back. And I began to discover these 6 principles. And so I'll share them with you. The very first principle is the positive mindset. And I'll be explaining each one. The next one is playing to your strengths. The third is what I call the circle of 5. The fourth, and we added this one because of the new research we had in Whole and Healthy Workplace Nudge, sleep and physical wellness, meaning and purpose. and then daily accomplishments. In 2000, I had positive mindset. Now, describe what that is. I didn't yet know about playing to my strengths. I discovered that in 2002. I had a strong circle of 5. Sleep and physical wellness was not part of the equation for me. I burned the candle on both ends. Meaning and purpose was strong, but the sense of accomplishment was wiped away. So I had 3 of the 6. And I'll tell you how I built back and how you can build back all 6 of them. So remember, I talked about Dr. Seligman and his research on soldiers and post-traumatic growth. Dr. Seligman is known as the father of positive psychology. And positive psychology is a field that has just mushroomed over the last 20 years. In 2011, I discovered his book called Flourish, and it goes through 5 of these traits. The positive mindset, there's 2 kinds of happiness. There's what's called hedonic happiness. I've got an ice cream cone, it makes me happy. And then there's what's called eudaimonic, or the better self happiness, where you see events as making you a better person. Angela Duckworth talks about grit. This is a form of that kind of mindset. It's that persistent ability just to not give up. And I had that, and that came from my mom. My wife has described it in our 41 years of marriage as the pit bull quality. Sometimes it serves me well. Sometimes my wife would rather the pit bull stay outside. So that pit bull quality is part of that positive mindset. And we heard Julie talk about it several times in the presentation in terms of taking tragedy and turning it into a positive. That's a mindset, and it's a skill, and it can be developed. Now, the next one, Martin Seligman was a protege of Dr. Donald Clifton. You may know Dr. Clifton through the Strength Finder assessment in the company called Gallup. Donald Clifton is the father of what's called strength psychology. And this is a real paradigm change, not only for schools, but in business and in life in general. Dr. Maria Kirstefan, who was the superintendent in the Atlanta School District, used this, and it's an assessment tool that looks at your top strengths. And she said, we're here to change what's wrong to what's strong. That was the paradigm shift. And that came directly from Dr. Donald Clifton. Now, for me, I've been working with these strengths since 2002. And in 2005, we found a company that takes these strengths and turns it into a deck of cards, a color quadrant system, which gives us a lot more meaning to it. And you can see here, I'm giving a workshop, and you can see each person's profile in the back. But what I want you to notice is in the bottom left, what you're seeing are my top 5 Clifton strengths: strategic, learner, achiever, connected, and relator. My strengths fall into 3 of the 4 quadrants. It creates a leadership style called a servant leader. But the reason I'm showing this is that what works for me in terms of building resilience and my strategy for resilience will be completely different for you. So there's no one size fits all. And what we love about this is it's highly individualized. So my strategy will be different. And that's an important thing to remember. But playing to your strengths, and what the Clifton Strength Finders assessment assesses is those strongest synaptic clusters in your brain, the most natural, instinctive ways. In other words, what you naturally do best and enjoy most. And when you trigger those, they release dopamine. And when you stay in an extended state, they release endorphins. So there's a rejuvenating effect of playing to your strengths. So that's an important thing to look at. And this became a vital part of my survival tools. Your circle of 5. Who can you call at 2 a.m. if you had a need and would come to help you? Who are those close friends? Now, they may chew you out. They may not be happy, but they'll still show up. You're probably not surprised. You've probably read the statistics that the average American has less than 2 individuals that would fit in this quality. We have a loneliness epidemic that's been written about for the past few years before the pandemic. And now that we're sheltering in place, it's rising. And so having this circle of 5, which was part of my resiliency back in 1999, is essential, especially working through your 5 stages of grief. When I got hit with all of this, the first thing I did is called up my mentor and called up some of my, what I call my inner board of directors. These are life colleagues that hold me to my best, encourage me, help me get a clean perspective, and are there when I need them. Sleep. Okay, so if we were going to end here, this would be it. This would be the culmination. If there is only one thing that I could convey that I would do, especially now, it's improving sleep. So I want you to be honest. How many of you get 7 to 7.5 hours of solid sleep? Okay. So now what I want you to do, what you probably told me, is the amount of time you're actually in bed. That's not sleep. I want you to subtract an hour from that. Now, if your number is less than 6 hours, you are considered to be legally drunk. In other words, your brain cognitive levels are not fully functioning. But also remember too, and think about times when you have not had a good night's sleep. How are you the next day? How easy is it for you to be generous, to be kind? Jim Lair, we learned this in the very first kickoff for our research. We saw a group of teachers going through a workshop at Next Jump. They did a resiliency test on these teachers. 75% of them were considered to be unable to function in terms of, you are so low, we don't know how you get out of bed. 25% were ready to pop. That was the big aha for us, seeing that we're not dealing with an engagement issue. We're dealing with a drained, tired, weariness issue. Sleep is the number one thing we can do to improve it. Imagine if the school that you're in, if everybody in that school and all the kids got a good night's sleep for a whole week. Just imagine how easy it would be, how much more easy it would be. So please, please, there's great resources on sleep. There's good books by Matthew Walker on why we sleep. There's Sleeping Smarter. In the book Whole, we have a whole chapter on it. We need to rediscover this, and that needs to be part of the curriculum. We need to be teaching everybody and giving them the permission and valuing sleep. Meaning and purpose, Dr. Viktor Frankl. Man's search for meaning. Dr. Frankl was a prisoner of war in Auschwitz. And what he found is that when you cannot control your circumstances, there's one thing you can control. You can control your thinking and your character. And what he found is those who survived Auschwitz focused on agency, what they can control, and becoming better through it. And they also live for something bigger than themselves and something beyond themselves. It's part of that meaning and purpose. I was just on a call today with an organization that was struggling with, they build facilities for their constituents, and they're not able to do that. So now, what's our purpose? What's bigger than us right now? What's our meaning? And what they're finding is helping each other become better versions of themselves is a great purpose. Building community amongst themselves is a great purpose. And it took them some time to think about, what does that mean for us since we can't build and deliver what we normally do? And then the final one here is having a sense of accomplishment. What are you measuring progress by? So when the normal standards of measurement disappear, what can you measure? Well, one of the things we can measure is, am I getting up consistently in the morning, and celebrate that success? Am I starting and working on really important strategic things? And did I get something accomplished today? Did I take a walk? Did I have a connection time with my family? These are all things we need to begin shifting from what I call lagging indicators, test grades, accomplishing content, to what we call leading indicators. Do I feel good today? Did I have a good conversation? New kinds of metrics called leading indicators to help us measure progress. When I got hit by this and my business disappeared, I had to start measuring, do I have something meaningful I can do today, something I can create today? So we need to begin looking and keeping a different set of score, because it matters that you do keep score. It matters that you give yourself an attaboy or an attagirl and celebrate when you do something. One of the things I started doing is when I get up and go to tea, I've got a cue that says when I come back before I can start working again, I've got to do 5 sit-ups. And I celebrate if I do 5 sit-ups. It's not a lot, but it begins to build. It's compounded. So the rest of my story. So what happened to me in 2020? Well, first of all, back in 2000, I was 195 pounds, 45 years of age, out of shape. Today, I'm 65 years old. I did qualify for Medicare this year, but I'm in better health than I have been since college. Now, it didn't happen overnight. Remember, I've been on a 20-year journey building resilience through those 6 key disciplines. In March, I lost 95% of my revenue. All of my revenue was based on live keynotes, workshops, consulting. That all disappeared. But what I was able to do is quickly get to the point of not expecting, not even hoping that that comes back, but asking the question, now what? Let me assume that I'm never going to be able to get on a plane again. What would I do? And what I discovered, and you begin to discover when you get that clarity, is, I've got 2 extra days a week that I never thought I would have. And I'm putting that to creative time. Yeah, I can redesign a workshop and do a combination of things. Yes, I can create content and make it easier for my clients to access my information. And because of that, what took me 5 years to rebuild in 2000, now I rebuilt in 5 months. That's that bounce back resiliency factor. And so getting that creative mindset, you have to have let go and not be stuck in order to think fresh again and to be open to that. Now, my wife and family have benefited as well, because I'm home every night to wash the pots and pans and the dishes. That's my new job. I used to get out of that because I traveled. Now that's my job. And I love doing it because we have conversation in the kitchen. After dinner, we pull out a little book and we just share together. You know how long it's been since I've been able to do that? 20 years that we did that kind of thing, and finding new ways to connect, finding ways to enjoy ourselves without having to go out to dinner. All of these are new discoveries, but it took me about 4 weeks to get over thinking that I could bargain a client to just discount my fees or postpone it a bit, and just give all that up and begin to build fresh again. So where are we with this? What I'd like you to do is start thinking about and rank these 6 elements yourself. Which is your strongest? Mine was positive mindset. And then second was circle of 5. And then playing to my strengths became a new one. And the strategy is you start with the strongest one that you rank, and then you begin to build to the next one. Now, I'm going to add a caveat in that. And the caveat is everybody start with sleep. I am sure if you were all face-to-face with me and I asked you, in fact, this is what usually happens when I ask the 2 questions in coaching. How are you doing? I typically get an answer, and a pretty honest answer. And then when I ask, how are you sleeping? I typically get a body language cue, like someone dropping their head or scrunching their face. Let's make sleep the #1 resiliency habit that we have. Meaning and purpose. What are you living for beyond yourself? What is bigger than yourself? And let's go back to positive mindset. How do we build that eudaimonic happiness? In other words, becoming a better version of ourselves. It's built into Maslow. Our inner potential is something that we not only can become, but we're compelled intrinsically to grow to that better version of ourselves. And it has nothing to do with circumstance. It has to do with our skills, our natural strengths, and our character. Then finally, let's start building and looking at a different way to keep score, a dashboard. I'm going to hold up. So every day I create a little dashboard here. That's my little checklist. And then I go through, and part of that celebration is when I check something up, I said, way to go. That's just like you. You do that kind of stuff. You get it done. So having that, and in our family too, we've kind of conditioned ourselves when we see something that somebody does, we say, man, thanks. Dr. Jim Lair, who is one of the founders of the Johnson & Johnson Center for, high performance. He's also a professional athlete coach. He says one of the #1 elements or traits of happiness and health is kindness. Think about that for a minute. You have to have margin or reserve. If you've got somebody who's kind of draining that kindness, in order to be able to show kindness, you have to have some reserve and not be easily triggered. If you're tired, or if you're missing some of these elements in the 6 disciplines, you can be triggered easily. So I also want you to look at these as design criteria. We've actually used these as design criteria for workplaces. When I sit down with users and I talk about, so how is this environment, how are we building in positive mindset in this environment? You know, that grit, that stick-to-itness. What does that look like, and how do we replicate that? And how do we build that into our behaviors with one another? How do we create an environment that plays to our strengths? Where do the introverts need to be? Where do the extroverts need to be? You know, what do you naturally do well? What kind of environment works best for you? It's a great conversation. Connectedness, that's the circle of 5. Gallup says that you also need to have at least one of those circle of 5 at work or in your school situation. So how do we create environments that allow for that connectedness? Dr. Lou Cozzolino calls it that tribal connection piece of it. And it's very important. And as Paige said early on, there's a design element behind that. Now, sleep and wellness, I would translate that in design. Is the environment, does it allow us movement? Does it allow us to change the nature of how we're learning? Does it allow us to learn through different modalities? Do we go out and take breaks? I really would like to see recess reinstituted a couple times a day, just to get outside and experience that, to get that physical wellness. Meaning and purpose. We're all in that business, lifelong learners. So how do we create an environment that really stimulates lifelong learning? How do we look at our communities as pieces to our extensions of our classroom? And that's the greater purpose. If lifelong learning is the greater purpose, now we think from a design standpoint, where are all the venues and places that create an ecosystem of learning? And then looking at daily accomplishments. I'm enjoying the fact that lots of schools are setting aside the standardized testing and now being able to focus on what daily accomplishments may be. So please go through this with yourself and with your team and with your family. So remember, part of your leadership is not your expertise right now. So going back to the very beginning, your leadership credibility is how you show up. Your resiliency, your willingness to have the conversation and guide a journey, not solve a problem. This is a different kind of stage we're in. We don't have ready-made solutions. This is like Paige was talking about. Think of your role as a consultant, an architect, a vendor for schools as creating an environment of discovery, inquiry-based, discovery-based, team-based learning with your palette of solutions as part of the toolkit they can work with. It's very engaging and it gives them agency in the solutions that they're looking for as well. So to wrap this up, one of the things you can do, and this is what I'd like you to do as you go back. So as you go back, retrace where you have been in those stages of disaster. When you first got the notice of it, when you first were impacted, that heroic stage. Part of processing and healing is processing through the story and do it in story form. We actually have a template for you that I'll provide that you can get for free. That's a safe way to share stories. We have a my work from home story, my return to school story. We have one that we created after the George Floyd killing on how to help teams have safe conversations around major events. And so this is a way that I would encourage you to help lead your clients and your constituents, your family, even your colleagues through processing. One of them is to retrace where we were as a school. What was that heroic stage like? What was the honeymoon stage like? When did we trigger into a bit of disillusionment? When have we gotten back into rebuilding and recognize this is not linear? We'll be going through that. The importance for leadership to know is that because it's not linear and we'll be revisiting these, once you begin to see the patterns, you then know what to do and what to prepare for, and it doesn't catch you off guard. This is the Gandhi quote. We must be the change that you want to see. We need to be that change. Unless you're practicing and you're coming in with resiliency, with that discovery mindset, with that helpfulness and that kindness. What we saw a lot in the very early stages, I saw this in the contract furniture business, because sales disappeared, people were freaking out, trying to come up with plexiglass, going in and let me sell you on plexiglass solutions. And the challenge is that company may have just laid off 1,000 people. And then we've got that desire to go in because of our own survival. We have to realize we have to rehumanize this and really be in the journey together. It's only through the journey that we can help solve problems. And the primary problem that I see us as an industry needing to solve for is resilience going forward. 95% or 92% of all the people who died during COVID have either had chronic disease or obesity. So we have a long way to go in terms of solving these problems of making learning less sedentary, building resilience in our teachers, reducing stress, because stress is a leading pathway into the unhealthy coping behaviors that lead to those conditions. Then I also want you to think about, let's design for the 6 traits of PTG, post-traumatic growth. One of the things I'll be providing is that we have a mini book on this whole webinar. I've given similar versions of this webinar to other companies, so we transcribed it, edited it, have all the images with it, and we'll be providing that as a free download for your participation in this event. So I'd like to encourage you, check out there's a free sample of why employees need, why mental health for employees is a need for restarting the economy. You have free access to that, to the sample version of that. And I think we're going to be moving into the Q&A portion. So I want to encourage you to stick around, ask questions, and I'm looking forward to hearing your reaction to this.
Thank you, Rex. People may have a little Zoom fatigue themselves, as the chat box has not been very active, but we do have a question. from Molly Smith, she says, this discussion is important for educators, but even more important for learners. How can educators employ these ideas in the current COVID environment?
That's a great question. So one of the resources we learned about is a place called the Momentous Institute in Dallas, Texas. And the Momentous Institute is known for social emotional literacy. They have a lab school. They have a family therapeutic center for at-risk community. And then they built a lab school, and it teaches a lot about brain health. So every class that the Momentous Institute has, from 3 years old on to 5th grade, they're teaching kids about their brains. One of the favorite exercises they do is called Settle Your Glitter. And it's a glitter ball. And they talk about what stress can do. So we recognize that kids coming out of chaotic homes, abusive situations, they're already coming to school with a huge load of stress on them. And one of the things that can happen is if you give them a math problem, then that additional cognitive load creates what the Momentous Institute calls an amygdala hijack. And they teach what the amygdala looks like, and so the amygdala is this little part inside the brain. And when it has the hijack, boom. And so when somebody is getting triggered or getting ramped up, they have a little glitter ball. In fact, I've got one back in my office, and it's like a little snow globe. And they'll shake it up and they'll give it to a student and they'll say, go settle your glitter. And all it is a little moment of mindfulness. And there's a little area in the classroom where you can go and just breathe and watch the glitter settle to the bottom. So teachers are going to find students coming back to school that are less regulated. We have a whole chapter in the book Whole on the challenge of dysregulation. And the biggest antidote to dysregulation is for a teacher to be resilient. If a teacher's coming in stressed and a student acts out because they're overstimulated and they trigger, what happens is triggers. And so all the kids who are a little overstimulated will get triggered by someone else's trigger. And so watching and knowing that and getting training on how to handle triggers and something called social contagion, that wildfire effect. We've seen it in certain protests over events where it just becomes a wildfire. We first learned about it through the Momentous Institute and Nadine Burke's book, Adverse Childhood Experiences. And it's real. And what we're finding is that kids are going to come back compromised, and we need to be prepared for that. And again, teachers need to be resilient, rested in order not to be triggered and have the skills on what to do. And it's got to be more than training. Another thing we learned too about social emotional literacy is a lot of schools are training their teachers in this, but they're not bringing their teachers into this themselves. In other words, they're giving them skills, but this is not a skill thing. This is this is modeling. So Dr. John Gasco, who was the Dean of Education for University of North Texas, he's now the Chief Wellness Officer for Uplift Academy, talks about how do we retrain our ANS, our autonomic nervous system. That's the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight or the on button, and the parasympathetic. So a lot of work I think teachers are going to be doing is de-escalating tension, giving breaks, helping people become present. And so that's a whole nother set of things that the teachers are going to need to learn by modeling, because if you just teach them and you don't teach them the practice of it and they don't practice it themselves, it's just another thing they got to figure out how to do.
Thank you. Carrie Beth asks, what kind of built environment spaces would you suggest to encourage these techniques and mindsets?
Yeah, so responsive classroom is a neat thing we saw in Canada, how they have the classroom set up. So they give the kids a lot of agency. And the classroom is set up so there's certain zones. So they have a greeting zone in the classroom. So having kind of these patterns and these rituals is a part of creating psychological safety. So they have a greeting zone and they start as a circle and they learn the skills of introducing one another. And then they sit in small little groups to begin getting a warm-up exercise into the content. Having a very flexible environment. One of the classrooms we went to that we saw in the teacher, this was a science classroom. When the kids come in, all of the furniture is off to the side, all folded up. And so the children come into the classroom, find out what the lesson plan is for the day, and then they decide which is the best setup. Is it going to be team-based? Is it going to be classroom-based? So flexibility and adaptability is key. We've got some also that talk about don't overstimulate, especially for young kids. Don't have too much stimulus in the environment, visual stimulus. Keep it clean and keep it simple, but make it relevant. Make it relevant visuals as opposed to just lots of decoration. Those are a few things in there. Sit to stand. Dr. Mark Bendon, who is at Texas A&M University, an ergonomist specialist, he found that if you have a variety of seating heights, if you have like sitting, stool height, standing height, and kids have a choice, what they found is that children who either had ADD or had maybe were obese and had some blood sugar regulation challenges, they performed as well as every other kid if they had the choice to be either in a stool situation or a standing situation. So there's lots of tools and lots of research on creating these ergonomic environments, these adaptive learning environments, these team-based environments, social and emotional literacy, how the environment. At the Momentus Institute, the hallways all have tactile, they all have different kind of textures on them for the little kids. So all of this, there's great research on all of these kinds of things. And I recommend anybody who wants a link to some of these resources, just send me a note and I'll be happy to create a list of here's resources that can provide you help on how to design environments around this.
Oh, that'd be great. Thank you. We have a question here, a comment and a question. When you say that teachers are exhausted, that resonates. My wife is a teacher. We are in an age where all we do is add to teachers' workload.
Yes, right.
And then COVID came along.
Right.
But I don't think school leaders get it. How do we bridge that gap?
Man, what a great question. And I just want to reemphasize that goes back to, if you recognize kids need to learn social emotional literacy and you put teachers through another training program, that's just adding to the load and the stress. So helping them become that. One of the things I'd recommend in the school is begin a book study club on what does healthy teaching look like? What does resilience look like? I mean, there's other books besides ours on that. There's the book Flourish by Dr. Seligman. And then begin to ask, how do we bring these into our school? We have a little mantra. Let's begin with the collection of the curious. I'm sure there's more than one teacher in the school that would love to figure out how do we become more resilient, healthier, and that come together. And then out of that becomes a cohort of the committed. So a collection of the curious to a cohort of the committed. And then the next stage of that is pilot things, prototype, experiment, take a classroom and see how it works. We're in this wonderful environment of experimentation that we can do. Now, to put in perspective, administrators are feeling tremendous stress. So under stress, unless they're being taken care of, then they're going to be in this continual defense mode, vigilance mode, fight or flight mode, because their budgets are being cut. They're feeling behind, the board is on their back, all of those things. So if we as suppliers and architects and designers can help people design towards these qualities. I mean, every space you're in gives you a feel or a tone. Does it feel safe? Does it feel comfortable? Do I feel relaxed? Do I feel tense? Let's start looking at how spaces affect us emotionally and cognitively, and begin working towards what we want.
Thank you. How about this question? What about the greeting space when you're on Zoom? Do you have any ideas?
You mean where everybody's in wait mode?
Yes, everybody's in wait mode. How do we address that waiting space?
Well, that's a great, so a couple things. What we've seen done is a rotating slide deck that has some interesting questions. When you go to the movie theater, they'll have quizzes or trivia things before the movie comes, or they'll have an announcement. So having that up front, posting kind of the rules of engagement, how you want people to participate ahead of time, having a countdown clock, all those things help people sense progress moving forward. So having that piece to the equation instead of just coming in and seeing a title slide, that takes some work to do, but you can go on YouTube and find some really good videos to embed that play prior, creating a movie trailer kind of expectation coming in. Zoom fatigue is a real issue. So here's something I want you to be aware of from a health standpoint. When we're just normal life, your brain is the highest calorie consuming organ in your body. It consumes between 20 to 30% of your calories. In this environment, it's consuming 40 to 50%. And what I've started doing, and this is going to be geeky for you, but I've got 3 trackers here. I've got an Oura Ring, a Whoop, a Halo, and I've got a BioStrap. What we've begun to do is measure the strain, the stress that this creates. And what we found is that there's a high correlation between doing this and doing hard physical work. The disappointment is you're burning more calories. I did a 2-hour workshop like this. Normally, live 2-hour workshop, I'd burn 300, 350 calories. I burned 688 calories. Now, you would think I'd be real happy about that, but I didn't lose any weight because those are all stress calories. So part of what we're going to have to learn in this new mode is design for the drain of being on this environment. And one of the things I've done is I've shortened the content time of a meeting from an hour to 45 minutes. So I've got a full 15-minute break. We have a chapter called The Teacher Athlete. And the thinking there is that athletes perform and then rest, perform and then rest. But what we have teachers doing is they're on without any true real break. It's just not sustainable. So prior to COVID, what we felt was the load on teachers and the stress was unsustainable and chronic and getting to a critical factor. Since the pandemic, it's gone from chronic to acute. And so now we've got to pay attention to it.
Thank you so much, Rex, for your message. Please send along a list of resources, and I will post them to our members. And just make sure that everyone who is looking for those resources has access. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Janelle. Appreciate it.
And with that, I'm going to throw it to, I think, Phil Pinelli.
Thank you, Rex, for such an inspiring and motivating message to send us on our way. I'd like to once again thank our sponsors. There's no way an event like this could be provided without the help of companies which annually support this conference and the association. Thank you, Tarkett, Shaw, VS, Arcobel, Meteor, Verco, Front Row, CSRS, Erickson Hall, Kahn, RSA, Schrader Group, and SMMA. Please don't forget that our Planning and Design Awards will be a free event to anyone who wants to join the celebration of great school projects around the world. Please hold December 8th for this special event. Details will be emailed to you. Finally, I hope that we can convene in Denver for our LearningSCAPES 2021 conference. It's a vibrant city that offers us great outdoor adventures and activities, and is a community that fully supports schools and the built environment. I want to assure you that regardless of where we are at that point with the triple pandemic, A4LE will continue to stay relevant and provide you with cutting-edge resources and valuable networking opportunities. Hope to see you in person, if possible, in Denver 2021. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay engaged.